In looking up mothers, I came across this very interesting story. There was this couple, a guy named William and a woman named Mary, excuse me. A guy named William, a woman named Mary, got married. And they had a son named Henry. And they were raising Henry up. And William really wanted his son Henry to work on the family farm and take it over one day. And so he tried to teach him all kinds of things and show him some areas of the farm to do and things that were his responsibility. But Mary, the mom, really saw that Henry enjoyed mechanical things. And he loved seeing how things worked, taking them apart, putting them back together. He even got a watch one time for his birthday, and trying to figure out how it worked, he borrowed his friends' watches and his neighbors' watches and dismantled them and put them back together in the course of a few years. You see, Henry really loved figuring all of that out. And his mother had faith in him and began to stoke this desire and curiosity within him. And it only grew as he got older, so much so that Henry started his own company. And he began to build something that every single one of us experience today. Henry's last name was Ford. There never would have been a Henry Ford if there hadn't been a Mary Ford, because she had faith in her son. If it hadn't been for her, he would have just wound up working on the farm and never would have developed the system he used, the assembly line system that he used in his factory to create vehicles and create them cheaply. And now all of us are driving vehicles every single day, or experiencing vehicles in one way or another, as a result of that moment, that mom having faith in her child. The faith of a mother can change the world, whether you appreciate it or not. It can. And we think about that word faith, we toss it around and use it a lot. But what exactly is faith? What can faith do? What does faith do for us? How can faith be utilized? Well, we're going to look at that through the image of a faith of a mother from Exodus chapter 2. So if you flip in your Bibles to Exodus chapter 2, if you want to use a Bible there on the rack in front of you, it's on page 45. You can go there. And again, if you don't have a Bible at home that is yours, take the Bible on the pew rack home. That is yours. It's not ours anymore. It's yours. You take it. You need one. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 2. What's going on here in Exodus is the people of Israel. This is at the very beginning, right before they're really even a nation. They're just a family. They have moved to Egypt. A father and his myriad of children and all of their children moved to Egypt. And there in Egypt, they all began, as generations passed, to have more and more and more children. So much so that the nation of Egypt got scared, because there was almost more members of this family, as generations have passed, than there are other people in Egypt, than native Egyptians. And so the king of Egypt saw this and got scared. And so he enslaved those people. They're called the people of Israel because their patriarch, Jacob, had his name changed to Israel. So they're Jacob's descendants. So when people say Israel, that's what they mean, descendants from this one guy. And so they are there in the nation of Egypt. They've been enslaved, but they kept having children. And so the king of Egypt calls in the midwives who would deliver all the babies. And he said, when you go in to deliver the children of the Israelites, of the descendants of Israel, if it's a baby boy, kill it. You kill it or I'm going to kill you. And, well, the baby boys kept being born. So the king of Egypt calls the midwives back in and says, what are you doing? I told you to kill those babies or I would take it out on you. And then, I love this from the midwives, their gall and bravery before the king of Egypt. They walk in there and they say, well, the Hebrew women, the Israelite women are a lot stronger than your Egyptian women, and they just have the babies before we get there. Your Egyptian women are really weak, but the Israelite women are really strong, so they do it without us. That's not really what's happening. I mean, the midwives are delivering the babies. But they insult the Egyptian women in the process of hiding the fact that they were protecting these babies. Well, the king of Egypt had a problem with this, and so he issues this edict for the whole nation of Egypt. If you see an Israelite baby boy, any citizen, doesn't have to be military, any citizen, you see an Israelite baby boy, you have absolute authority to grab that baby and throw it in the Nile River, where there's crocodiles and all kinds of other things. Just grab the baby, throw it in the river. You don't have to have pretense. You don't have to say, hey, hang on a second, I just need to, just grab the baby and throw it in the river. And so this is the climate where we're going to come to in Exodus chapter 2. This is what's going on here. So they're enslaved, and now people are running around trying to find Israelite baby boys to throw them in the river. And we come to Exodus chapter 2, verse 1. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took his wife, a Levite woman. Now, the house of Levi, like I said a minute ago, if you're not familiar with what's going on here, but in Genesis and Exodus, you know, they're the Israelite people because they're descended from a man named Israel. One of his sons was a guy named Levi. And so these people here, this man and this woman, are descended from that guy, Levi. So when it says a Levite woman, she comes from Levi as their descendant. Verse 2. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. So she somehow is able to hide her. This is one of the most miraculous things. If you have children, you know that she's able to hide the baby in quiet for 3 months. I mean, some people have amazing babies that don't make a sound. I've never seen one, but they're out there, I assume. Well, somehow she's able to hide her baby for 3 months without noise, without the neighbors finding out, without the patrol, the Egyptian military patrol walking down the road finding out. She hides the baby for 3 months. Verse 3. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. Now, this is also fascinating to me because you remember what the edict was for the nation? Find an Israelite baby boy, toss him in the river. So what does she do? She puts him in a basket and puts him where? In the river. Technically, she's following the law, right? She puts him in the river. So she puts him in the river. She has great faith that the Lord is going to do something with this child. And she acts on that faith. She doesn't just leave faith to fate, because faith and fate are not the same thing. She acts on her faith. She has faith that the Lord gave her this baby for a reason. She has faith that the Lord is going to do something with this baby. And so she takes the baby, puts him in this basket that she has waterproofed, and puts it in the river. She worked her faith out because faith works. Faith is work. Faith isn't a default position for many. Faith is not easy. Faith works. Faith is work. Faith cannot be inactive. Faith cannot be inactive. It cannot be doing nothing because inactive faith actually does not exist. Inactive faith is an oxymoron. It's like saying thirsty water. It doesn't compute. Faith works. Faith has to do something. Faith has to act. Look at how James says it in James chapter 2. This is James, the brother of Jesus. James chapter 2, verse 14. James writes, "What good is it, brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, be warmed and filled,' without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead." Now, it doesn't say that works save you. That's not at all what James is saying. James is describing what faith looks like. Faith isn't just a statement that you make. Faith is a lifestyle that you follow. Faith is action, similar to how love is action. Love isn't just something you say. Love is an active verb. It's something you do. Faith is something you do. Faith is action. Faith has to be acted out. Faith has to be lived out. Otherwise, what James is saying is, it's not faith. You can say all day long, I have faith. But if you don't act on it, it's not really faith. It's just something you're saying. And words without something to back it up don't mean anything. Faith is action. Faith is work. And so in Exodus chapter 2, Moses' family, they are acting on their faith. They have faith in this child. They have faith in the Lord doing something through this child. And so they act on that. And they take the baby and they put the baby down in the river in this waterproof basket. Verse 4. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" Now, just picture for a second how nerve-wracking this was for the sister. I mean, the baby's there in the waterproof basket in the river, and the daughter of the guy who wants to kill all the baby boys comes into the river. The sister is freaking out. I mean, she's having, an anxiety fit because here comes Pharaoh. I mean, in any rationale, Pharaoh's daughter is going to send word to Pharaoh, and they're going to take care of this baby and do what needs to be done. But Pharaoh's daughter comes down, opens the basket. It's a baby. It's a Hebrew baby. And so on faith, the baby's sister comes up to Pharaoh's daughter and says, "Do you want me to go and get you a nurse for this baby?" This is a test, really. Because Pharaoh's daughter could have just as easily said, "Yeah, no, my father's issued an edict, and I, of all people, as the daughter of the king, need to be following this edict," and she could have just tossed the baby. But that's not what happens. The daughter comes down, says, "You want me to go find someone to nurse the baby?" Verse 8. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. If you don't think God has a sense of humor, you're not paying attention. Because look. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she named him Moses. Because, she said, "I drew him out of the water." So, they were trying to hide the baby for fear of Pharaoh's house coming to kill him. Someone from Pharaoh's house comes, sees the baby, pulls the baby out of the water, and then pays money for the baby's own mother to raise the child. How many of you moms would like to be paid cash money to raise your kids? I got one raising her hand, one honest one in the room, right? Paid by the king's daughter. So this isn't just paid a little bit. I mean, she's paid a handsome amount of money to raise her own son. And not just that, she doesn't have to do it in secret anymore. She's got the protection of the palace. Word gets out, don't touch that house. That's Pharaoh's daughter says it's okay. Pharaoh's daughter says it's fine. You better not go anywhere near. Do you hear that baby crying? It's a baby boy, but Pharaoh, they have the protection of Pharaoh. Don't go near that house. They had faith. You see, this is what faith does. In placing the baby in the water and having the sister there watch and having the sister come up and make a statement, a question, and then the mother come to raise her own child like this, faith trusts. Faith trusts. You know, in the Greek, what the New Testament is written in, faith and trust are the exact same word. Faith is trust. What faith does is it trusts God's control more than my own control. Faith trusts God's control more than my own control. You know, I may not always understand the situation. I may not always understand what's happening to me or what's going on around me, but faith doesn't need my understanding in order to trust. Faith just trusts. no matter what's going on. Now, you may say by your actions, or you may say it out loud, I don't know. I mean, you just may say by how you act and how you think, that my hands are the most capable hands, and you may have trust issues when it comes to certain situations. Don't raise your hand, but think about it. You have trust issues in any areas of your life, with a job or a kid or a health situation or just everything. You know, because you think my hands are the most capable. My hands, I know what I'm doing, and so when I am doing it and I am in control, that's the best way to do it. But faith trusts God's control every time. Look at what happens when of a guy who did not trust God's control. This is 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 8. This is Saul is king. He's only been king for a couple years. He's waiting for Samuel to come. Samuel's the prophet. Saul's waiting for Samuel to come, seek out the Lord, make a sacrifice, make an offering, and determine what God wants them to do. But all the while, Samuel's not there. The enemy is marching towards them. And the people from Saul's army are leaving because they're scared. They're deserting the army because they're scared as the other army comes. And so this is Saul in verse 8 of 1 Samuel 13. He waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, "Bring the burnt offering here to me and the peace offerings." And he offered the burnt offering. As soon as he had finished the offering, or offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet him and greet him. And Samuel said, "What have you done?" And Saul said, "When I saw the people scattering from me and that you did not come," he's placing the blame on Samuel, "within the days appointed, and the Philistines mustered at Michmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal. I have not sought the favor of the Lord." So look at what he says. He says, "I have forced myself and offered the burnt offering." Saul's painting it like I had no other choice. I had no other choice but to make this decision. I made this decision because I was scared. I made this decision because I was out of control. I made this decision because I couldn't control what was going on. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I just did this because I didn't want to wait. And Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God with which he commanded you. For then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought a man out after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." So this is the moment Saul loses the kingdom. This is the reason Saul's children do not continue on in the royal line. This is the reason David becomes king. Because Saul would not wait. Because Saul did not want to surrender control to the Lord. Because Saul wanted to keep control for himself. Saul did not want to wait for Samuel to show up. Because Saul didn't understand the situation. He took matters into his own hands, and in so doing, lost everything. Saul lost his faith, and it ended up ruining his life. Faith trusts. Faith trusts. Faith trusts God's control. Faith trusts that God knows what he's doing better than you do. Do you believe God knows better than you? Well, if you don't, he does. But faith trusts that God knows what he's doing. But Saul chose to trust himself rather than the Lord. He chose to trust his own timing rather than God's timing. And he completely messed everything up. By contrast, though, Moses' parents trusted God completely with the life of their own son. How many of us, if we were in the boat of Moses' parents, would have tried to just sneak out of Egypt, like under cover of darkness, get out of the danger? The situation arises, our child's under threat of life, we're just going to leave and not be here anymore. But God had a purpose in them staying. So they trusted God's wisdom, and they stayed. God protected their son. Ends up, Moses escorts the entire nation out of slavery some 80 years after this. We're going to jump over actually to a reference to this in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw that the child was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. So we see there in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23, it wasn't just the fact that they liked their child that they protected him. They did it, as stated in Scripture, by faith. By faith, they protected their child. By faith, they hid him, and God protected him. It was by faith that they did not fear what the king had issued. It was by faith they knew that God was going to take care of it. By faith, they completely trusted God. And their complete trust in the Lord, that decision, it ultimately led to the freeing of their nation because of the faith of one set of parents. See, because faith really is confidence in the Lord's intervention. Faith is confidence in the Lord's intervention. But you may say, sitting there in your seat, say, I've had faith many times, but what about when the Lord's intervention is not what I expected? You may actually be thinking, what about the times the Lord doesn't intervene? But I'll rephrase it and say, what if the Lord's intervention isn't what you expect? Comes in a way that doesn't meet your expectations? Because honestly, the Lord doesn't have to prove himself to you. But his intervention comes differently than what we thought. Here's a situation when that very thing happened. Daniel chapter 3. Here's 3 guys from the nation of Israel, descendant from the one man Israel. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have defied the king, and the king's going to throw them in a fiery furnace. And they answer the king when he's going to throw them in the furnace. And they say to him, O Nebuchadnezzar, that's the king, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. And then here's the great statement of faith. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. So faith is confidence in the Lord's intervention. And then we look at verse 18, but if not, if the Lord doesn't intervene like what I anticipate, if the Lord doesn't intervene like what I expect, if God doesn't do exactly what I want him to do, will I still have faith? If the answer is no, then it's not really faith. If the answer is no, then you don't have faith in God, you have faith in God doing what you want. You really have faith in yourself. Faith in God is trusting the Lord no matter what. That means even if he does something that I'm not necessarily a fan of in the moment because it hurts. Even if it happens in a way that I don't understand everything that encompasses that decision. And I may not until heaven. And when we get to heaven, it won't really matter because we're seeing the face of Jesus. Faith is confidence in the Lord's intervention. But faith also perseveres, even when the Lord intervenes differently from how we expect. Faith endures, faith perseveres. But it's in that perseverance that the problem often comes up. Because when we have confident faith in something, and that thing doesn't happen, our faith often will falter. And it will shake a little bit. Sometimes quite a lot. But faith like that is not in God himself. When our faith falters because the situation doesn't turn out exactly like we want it to, we have more faith in our anticipated outcome than in the God we should be placing our faith into. You see, true faith doesn't depend upon God meeting my expectations. Let me say it again. True faith doesn't depend upon God meeting my expectations. Because here's the deal. My expectations are flawed. You know why? Because I'm flawed. And so everything I touch is laced with my sin nature. And so any expectation that I would have of God is covered with my own sin. When I don't accept something that God does because I don't like it, that's my own sin. Honestly, it's pride saying I know better than God. And I've done that. And God, I don't understand why you did. God, if you would have done it this way, God, I would have done it like this, God, like for real. God, yeah, I'm not going to say, God, you messed it up because, in my mind, I can't say that. I'm arguing with myself, but I'm thinking, oh, my word. Ugh. It really would have been a lot easier in my life if God would have done it this way. Really, honestly, we would all think this. If every human being in my life was perfectly healthy and they all lived to 120 and then just dropped dead and never got sick, and I had $1 bajillion in the bank and owned the world, then everything would be perfect. And everybody did exactly what I wanted. Then it would just be awesome. Everybody just thought like I thought and acted like I want them to act, drive like I want them to drive, charge at the store what I think they should actually charge at the store, do in government what they're supposed to be doing in government according to my opinion. If they would coach my favorite football team like they should coach my favorite football team, then the Dallas Cowboys would win the Super Bowl every year. But the thing is, there's no faith in thinking like that. I was talking with somebody this week about a money situation. And this person I was talking with had money, but they came from a background of scarcity. And they were worried about getting back to that place. And my statement to them was, well, they were making right decisions with the money, but they had plenty of money, was, well, what's the worst that can happen? The money goes away and you have to trust God again with your situation, day to day rather than how it is now? How often do we really trust God? I mean, really trust Him. I mean, we can look at that, the Lord's Prayer all day long where it says, give me this day my daily bread. But honestly, none of us, or very few of us, are trusting God with our daily bread. We got enough bread for tomorrow and Monday and Tuesday. We've even got some in the freezer. We got enough bread. There's very few of us that are actually trusting God with our daily necessities every single day. Trust. And I'm not saying, well, give away all your bread and just see what happens. But I'm trying to point out, maybe there's other areas of your life that you're clinging on to control when you need to let it go of and let God handle it. You need to stop trying to maneuver, manipulate, stop trying to do political moves and get this, that, and the other thing and manipulate this person to do this. And if this person does that, then this person will do that. And then I've already got the decision in place when they come and ask me, oh, you're coming to me now. I got the perfect solution. Just trust that God's got it. Because I guarantee you, and I can give you story after story from my own life, I guarantee you, God's a lot better at bringing a solution than you are. If you try to wrestle it with your own hands, you're going to drown every single time. You've got to surrender control and allow God to take care of it. Because like I said, faith doesn't depend upon God meeting my expectations. True faith depends entirely upon God's holiness and nothing else. We have faith in God not because He does what we want. We have faith in God because He's holy. We have faith in God because He's perfect. And since God is always holy, then I should always have faith because my faith depends on His holiness, not on my sinful wants and expectations being fulfilled. My faith is in Him, period. Nothing else. Even if we've got to ask God for help sometimes, like the father who came to Jesus with his son and say, I believe, help me in my unbelief. I have faith, help me where I lack faith. And we need to come to God and say, God, I need help with my faith in this area. I know I need more faith here. I know I lack faith in this area, in our finances, with our kids, with our family, with a job situation, with this one person who just won't leave me alone. God, I need help. God, I need to trust you. God, I need to trust you with how I'm going to get gas to get to my job this week. And we need to come to God and say, God, I need help with faith in this area. Then that's what faith does. Then faith not only trusts and faith works and faith perseveres, faith asks for help. Faith asks for help. I mean, from God, God, I need help. But faith also asks for help from each other. You know what? I really need help, here. Faith is transparent. Faith is completely dependent upon what God's going to do with what God's given you to do it with. Do you trust him? Does your faith work? Does your faith trust? Does your faith persevere? No matter the outcome, no matter the expectations that are met or not met, what does your faith look like? Is it like these parents in Egypt in Exodus chapter 2? They had no idea that their life would be written down for all of us to read for millennia. All they were doing was acting on faith in the moment. They had faith. What may have seemed like one simple, momentary act of faith that would never be brought up again is now here for us to read and study for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Who knows what kind of act of faith or what God can do with a small act of faith in your life? That God does something in your life because of some act of faith you do today. There may be something in some of your lives right now. There's some of you right now, there's something you've been hanging on to and not wanting to let go of. And you've been wrestling with God over that thing. You've been kind of like Jacob. He had said at one point, that the man whose name was changed to Israel, he wrestled with God all night long because of an issue. Maybe you've been wrestling with God for months, and it's time to give up and let God do what God's going to do. And you need to have faith that God's got it. You need to stop trying to manipulate the situation and steer the situation how you want it to go. You need to act on your faith that God's going to do what God's going to do and allow him to do it. Because when you wrestle control away from God, what you're really doing is you're elbowing him out of the driver's seat and saying, I've got this, God. You sit there. You can take a nap. We need to let him take control. Let him do it. Let him do what he's going to do in our lives with what he has gifted us with, and allow him to do it because he can take care of it. In his timing, it may seem like Saul waiting for Samuel, like a last-second deal, but God's going to do it in his time. So trust him. Even if you don't see it, trust him. Faith doesn't depend upon you seeing it. You got to trust him. I mean, look at Job. He lost everything. And honestly, by the end of his life, if you read through the whole book of Job, you never see that he understands why what happened to him happened to him. He never finds out. Because it wasn't necessary for him to understand. All that was necessary was that he had faith. So will you have faith in the situation you're in your life? Will you have faith right now where you are? Will you take your faith and will you trust? Will you work out your faith? Will you have your faith persevere in wherever you are? Maybe right now what you really need is you need faith. You need to ask for help in your faith. Maybe you need faith for the first time. And you never stepped out in faith and believing in God. You've known it. You've thought about it. You've heard your mom talk about it. It's Mother's Day. You've heard her talk about it. But it's time for you to have faith. You to have it. Will you have faith today? Believe that Jesus is God's Son. That he died so all your sins would be forgiven. And then he rose from the dead so you can live after you die. Will you believe in that today? Because if you do, that's salvation. That's eternity wrapped up in one sentence. Will you believe in Jesus? Have faith today and have it forever in him. And so in just a second, I'm going to pray. And you have an opportunity to come. You can come up here and pray at the altar. Maybe you need to pray for yourself and your own faith in how it's lived out and in giving the Lord control and having faith in him. Maybe you need to come and pray for a family member or a friend, somebody you know who's really struggling in some areas of faith that they need to surrender, they need to give up. Maybe you need to come this morning after I pray, and you need to, I'm going to be standing right down here, and you need to come and say, hey, I want to have faith. I want to have faith. I want faith. For the first time, I'm ready to believe. So wherever you are in your faith journey, pray with me. God, I thank you for your word. I thank you for people like Moses' parents, acting on faith, demonstrating that faith. Moses' mom looking at him and making that basket, waterproofing that basket, and trusting enough that you were going to handle the situation that seemed absolutely impossible when it was against the law to have baby boys in their house. But you intervened in your time. It may have seemed too late for them, but you weren't done yet. God, I pray that all of us, our faith would be strong, that we would act out our faith, that we would trust you, trust your control, that our faith would persevere no matter the outcome, and we would stand with you always. God, if anyone here in the room or watching online needs to believe in you, needs to have faith in you for the very first time, that this would be that moment. That they would stop putting it off, stop arguing with you, stop wrestling with you, and surrender and say, I am ready for faith. God, I pray here and now this would be it. That we would all give in to you and your control and have faith in you. In your name I pray. Amen.